questions. So tonight's speaker is Dr. Theresa, and she is an anesthesia resident at Duke, about to start your third year, which is your CA2 year, so almost getting into that, like, close to halfway done with the anesthesia training and everything, which is very exciting. I'm an anesthesiologist myself, but on the other side for UNC. And anesthesia is super, yes, exactly, so there's a rivalry. But anesthesia is super cool, and anybody that's interested in it, and maybe even a medical student, cough, cough, Dominic, should definitely think about doing anesthesia, because that's what all the cool kids do. So,
it's true.
But anyways, Theresa is going to be presenting about Lebanon and specifically Christianity within Lebanon, and then also active member in the Lebanese Society of North Carolina. Also Jason too. There was the festival a couple of months ago, which it will be next summer as well.
You know it.
So everybody should go. It's in Raleigh. It's super cool. And yeah, so she'll be speaking here shortly.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. I actually hate public speaking. I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's too late to back down now. So I taught my presentation with Mara's creative assistance, Christ Among the Cedars. It's a brief discussion of Christianity in Lebanon, emphasis on brief. We're talking about thousands of years of history, and disclaimer number one, I am not an expert. There's very likely people in this room who know more about this than I do. I'm just Lebanese and Maronite, and I like talking about this stuff. I did most of this research just by myself, super informally. So don't take all of it to the bank, but I hope you find it interesting and informative. So, the Middle East. This is Lebanon. For anybody who doesn't know where it is, you can see it's just sandwiched right between Syria, Israel, and the Mediterranean Sea. So plenty of exciting things happening in that region at all times. Here's a to-scale picture of Delaware, just to give you a sense of size. It's not a big country by any means. It's about like 30 miles across. As the crow flies, you can drive from the north to the south in about 3 hours. So not big at all. Population 5 to 6 million, depending on what time you're looking at it. Let's see, we've got the Gaza Strip there highlighted in yellowish. It's tiny. That's where all the excitement's happening right now, just to give you a sense of how close everything is. This is just a quick look at the topography of Lebanon, because this does play a role in the history here. It's really just a mountain range. From the north to the south, it's just this range of mountains known as the Lebanon Mountains. And to the west of the mountains, you have this gentle slope down to the sea, peppered with towns, and then all the major cities are along the coast there. East of the mountains, much steeper descent into the Bekaa Valley, where most of Lebanon's agriculture takes place. And then you have a rise into the anti-Lebanon mountains, which form the border of Syria. And that's it. It's like coast, mountains, valley, Syria. So pretty simple, and the mountains are where most of Christianity kind of took root for various reasons, which we'll talk about. Let's see. So, Christians in Lebanon. There's been a continuous presence as far back as the 1st century AD. So we're talking about like the beginnings of Christianity, the very early Christians. We believe it was introduced to the region by St. Peter and St. Paul, who we all know well and love. Christians form approximately 35% of Lebanon's population today. Approximately. It's hard to calculate these things. Nobody responds to the census over there. But it still represents the largest proportion compared to the country's population of any other countries in the Middle East. Like Syria, for example, I think Christians are like 2-3% of the population, just for comparison. Predominantly Maronite Catholics. That is the largest branch of Christianity in Lebanon, but they've also got Greek Orthodox, Greek Catholics. There's a whole bunch. All right, things that we're not. I've actually heard all of these things. We're not Mennonites, we're not Marianites, we're not Melkites, we're not Eastern Orthodox. We are an Eastern Catholic Church in full communion with Rome, originally inspired by the spirituality of St. Maron, who we'll talk about in a second, and hence the name Maronites. It did represent the earliest form of monastic life in the Middle East. So here's St. Maron, the man, the myth, the legend. He was a 4th century Syrian Christian hermit. He lived in the mountains near Antioch, died around the year 410 AD. I think I have a map of where Antioch is. There it is. This is a modern day map, of course, but that's where Antioch would have been. It wasn't necessarily Turkey at the time, but it is now. Revered as a highly ascetic monk with a gift of healing. He's often portrayed like this, kind of out in the wild, like in the mountains somewhere, because that's where he lived. His followers became the Maronite Church, and in particular his disciple Abraham was said to have brought Maronite Christianity to the Phoenicians of Lebanon. So we're talking about like the earliest settlers of that region. So go Abraham. All right. So the House of Maron. This was, we'll talk about it in a second. We all, I think, some of us are familiar with the Council of Chalcedon. It happened in 451. This was one of the earliest kind of gatherings of church leaders that was designed to, or that concluded, they sort of affirmed that Christ's nature was in fact both human and divine. And the Maronites were one of the staunchest supporters of the whole council and this conclusion. So kind of as a result of their that good grace, Pope Leo instituted the first Maronite monastery on the Orontes River in Syria, and kind of as a show of good faith, and they called that monastery the House of Maron. As a result of the Maronites kind of defending the council, it sparked sort of like many years of war between them and the Monophysites in the region. The Monophysites just being people who did not believe that Jesus in fact had dual nature. And that was just kind of a constant source of harassment for the Maronites there. And Beit Marun, or the House of Maron, was ultimately destroyed in 936 AD. And that was as a result of the Turkish kind of Mamluk occupation. So it was around this time that all these Maronite refugees retreated almost wholly to the Lebanese mountains, and you really didn't see any remnants of them left in Turkey or Syria. They kind of all went and just hid. This is the Orontes River, and so the House of Maron would have been kind of in that northern bend near where we saw Antioch portrayed earlier. Okay, so this is where the Maronites ended up, in the mountains of Lebanon, in a place we now call the Holy Valley. We call it the Holy Valley because it's literally just like peppered with monasteries and hermitages and like ancient communities of these early Christians. And I believe, according to my research, it's still kind of the largest and most intact collection of these early Christian monasteries that we have. So these are some pictures that I took on some of my trips to Lebanon, and these are just a couple of the beautiful old monasteries that you'll find in the Holy Valley. You can do this amazing like 9-mile hike from one end of the valley to the other. Takes you most of the day if you do all the stops, which you should, but it's awesome. All right, so what was the Maronites' like relationship with Rome during this time? We all know about the Great Schism in 1054. During this time, the Maronites were still kind of holed up in the mountains, just trying to survive. So they weren't really a part of this. I don't even know how much they knew, or like their leaders knew about what was going on. They were all just focused on surviving in the middle of kind of, Islam-occupied territory. So they were sort of isolated from this split. When the First Crusade reached Antioch in 1098 AD, they were like, oh my gosh, there's Christians here. This is amazing. Everyone was surprised. Nobody knew who they were. Like, they hadn't been in contact with Rome for over 300 years. But thanks to just staunch loyalty to tradition, they were still like very much in keeping with the Church of Rome. And yeah, so that was kind of cool. They established good relations with France at the time. Lebanon is still very Francophilic. A lot of the schools there are French educated. Most of the Christians there are fluent in Arabic and French. And this is kind of when all that started. The Crusaders were ultimately defeated by the Mamluks, who were Sunni Muslim, and that kind of started a bit of a dark time for the poor Maronites, because it sort of drove out the last of their protection. So the Mamluk Empire reigned roughly from the 13th to the 16th centuries, and this was just 300 years of like pure misery. Just sort of constant persecution. A lot of their towns were destroyed. Their patriarch was hunted down and killed. You saw a lot of Maronite refugees at this time over to the island of Cyprus. And then the Ottomans took over in the 16th century, and they kind of just like didn't care about the Maronites for a long time. And that was like more of a golden age for them. Like, as long as they were left alone, they really flourished. They rebuilt towns, churches, communities. The Jesuits arrived, God bless them, in like 1656. And once again, they were like, oh my gosh, like there's Christians here. So that was fun. And then around the 19th century, during the reign of the, I guess they call him the Mad Caliph, he decided, like, actually, no, I don't want Christians in my empire. What are they doing here? How have they survived for so long? Kill them all, kind of thing. And that's almost what they did. So again, thousands of churches, monasteries, villages were destroyed. And this is when you start seeing diasporas pop up, as far out as Brazil, Mexico, and the U.S., because the Christians are really just like trying to get the heck out. World War I, another big hit. Again, most of the Christians lived up in the mountains with pretty fragile supply lines, and the war itself was enough to kind of knock out a lot of their survival infrastructure, and you saw tens of thousands die of starvation and disease in the mountains. So really, the hits just kept on coming. Fast forward to the Lebanese Civil War. Terrible, terrible time. It raged from about 1975 to 1990. You saw about 150,000 casualties. And this was probably the largest exodus of Christian Lebanese to date. They lost, about 1 million people, just really up and ditched if they could. And if you think about what proportion of the population that is, that's almost, like 20-25% of the population. Probably higher if you consider the proportion of Christians who left the country. So where are all these folks now? We've got thriving diasporas in Brazil, Europe, Australia, the USA, really all over. There's 2 eparchies in the US. There's the Eparchy of St. Maron in Brooklyn, which comprises 43 parishes, most of the major cities, just kind of up and down the East Coast. And then there's Our Lady of Lebanon in Los Angeles with 35 parishes. This is roughly their distribution. There's only 2 of them. So our church here, St. Charbel in North Raleigh, is part of the Eparchy of St. Maron, obviously. All right, a little bit about Maronite spirituality. I'm not going to dive in too deep. You could probably do a PhD on this. Lots of people ask me about the cross that's on my necklace. My sisters all wear it as well. It's just a Maronite cross. I don't know what the textbook answer is for why it has 3 bars, but what I've always been taught is that it just represents the 3 persons of the Trinity, and that was always good enough for me. If anyone knows more than that, feel free to chime in. But that's our cross. Some Maronite saints depicted at the bottom here. One of the most characteristic elements of the Maronite liturgy is a rich library of Syriac hymns that were composed by this fellow on the bottom right, St. Ephraim, who lived in the 300s AD. We're still singing his hymns, you guys. They're the same ones. We still sing them in Syriac, and they comprise most of the divine music that we use in the Maronite liturgy. Mass is usually said in a combination of Arabic and Syriac. Here in the U.S., a lot of the churches have started adopting English in the Mass as well, just for folks who are no longer fluent in Arabic. A lot of the prayers are predominantly chanted, even some of the call and response between the priest and the congregation. There's a deep devotion to Our Lady that's not specific to the Maronites, but it is a strong element of their spirituality. This picture here on the top right is Our Lady of Lebanon in Jounieh, Lebanon. And there's some big people there just for scale. It's a big statue. She's facing towards the center of Beirut with her arms kind of open. A gift from France, again with the friendship between the 2 countries. The Maronites have adopted a lot of land practices, mainly through the influence of the Crusaders way back in the 12th century. And those practices were kind of more formalized in the 1700s, okay, this is in fact how we're going to do the Mass, and these are the things we're going to adopt. But there's still some elements that are unique. I'm sure if you guys attended a Maronite liturgy, you'd probably be better equipped to tell me in what ways it differs or not, because I'm just kind of used to it. This is courtesy of Jason on his trip to Lebanon, 10 years ago? Thereabouts. Yeah, thereabouts. He got this clip of a Maronite priest saying the consecration in Syriac. It's always chanted, and I just have a short clip of it here. If I can get it to play, maybe? I don't know how that will work here. Maybe not. That's okay. That's okay. We'll skip it. But they always chant the consecration in Syriac, and it's cool. I'm a fan. This is a picture of our family at St. Joseph Church in our hometown, Jizin, Lebanon. You can see the priests are using the high altar. They're facing away from the congregation. Again, not unique to the Maronite Church, very much adopted from the old Latin churches, but cool that they still do it in some of the parishes today. John John Paul II came to Lebanon. We're very proud of this. He visited in 97, I believe. He celebrated Mass in Beirut. About 250,000 people attended. And at the time, he said that Lebanon is more than a country. It is a message of freedom and an example of pluralism for East and West. And I believe he's right. It's an eclectic mix of religions and even different branches of Christianity. And I'm not going to say they get along perfectly, but they've made it a good bit and through quite a lot. So what is up with the Cedars? Okay, we all hear about the Cedars of Lebanon. It's mentioned 103 times in the Bible. I just put a few of the verses here. We're not going to read them, but you know, they are native to Lebanon, and they have been harvested extensively over the centuries. They're just kind of an integral part of Lebanon's history. The city of Byblos, they call it the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world, established 6000 BC. I'm like, what the heck? They were trading cedar wood as far back as 3200. They built Phoenician ships with the wood. The Egyptians made their papyrus from it. Most famously, the Temple of Solomon. Many of the rooms, according to the Bible description, were lined or floored with cedar wood inlaid with gold, because it gotta be fancy. And yeah, I mean, it was probably the main source of trade for the coastal cities in Lebanon for a good while. Most of the trees are now gone. This is sort of a rough estimate of where the remaining reserves of cedar trees still survive, but the mountains used to be just solid, like covered in these trees. That's life, I guess. There are some reforestation projects underway. I think in areas of Turkey they plant like, I don't know, 50,000 new trees a year, but they grow really slowly. It's going to be centuries before we see the forests that we used to have there, if at all. Here are some pictures again that I've taken on some of our trips there. These are the Cedars. Top right, that's my sister Kira. Here she is. She's there just to give you a sense of scale. That's probably one of the oldest trees that they have in the preserve that's pictured here. You can see them in the wintertime, in the summertime. They're beautiful. They're amazing trees. Some of the oldest trees in the forest there are estimated to be around 3,000 years old. So these trees literally saw like Jesus walking around, or they would have if he ever went that far north. But it's amazing. That's my friend circled in red again, just to give you a sense of the scale of some of the trees. It's on our flag. I think, again, I don't know the textbook answer. I think the Lebanese Christians have a connection to the cedar trees because the trees have weathered thousands and thousands of years of hardship and persecution, and I think the Christians have as well. And so they just see the tree as sort of a symbol of, that kind of rugged perseverance in the face of difficulty. So it's on the national flag. All right. In summary, bit of an eclectic presentation, but Christians have been present in Lebanon since the earliest days of the church, and they're still there. They still represent the largest Christian presence in the Middle East, despite the mass exodus that we've seen multiple times over their history. They've suffered extreme hardship and persecution over the centuries, and because of that, you can now find them basically anywhere in the world. They tend to do well wherever they go. We still retain some ancient elements of the divine liturgy, especially in the form of those Syriac hymns and prayers that have been around since the beginning of time. Fun pictures. Basically done. Here's some more fun pictures. On the left there is St. Stephen's Church in Batroun, one of the coastal towns in North Lebanon. On the right is the town of Pshari. It lies just underneath that cedar forest that you saw pictured earlier. That's St. Seba's Cathedral, right smack in the middle of town. One of my younger brothers is named after that saint. Our Lady of Lebanon again, and if you're wondering who that suspicious character is, underneath her, here he is again, looking even more suspicious. Yeah, it's Jason. Yeah, good times, fun times. This is the shrine of, one of the shrines of Our Lady that they have scattered all over Lebanon. To get to her, you have to climb these stairs. You actually don't have to, but we do because it's more fun that way. And these are my siblings just kind of making their way up. I believe it's 800 steps or so. It's a lot of stairs. But when you get to the top, look at this view. So totally worth it, 100%. She's carrying the child Jesus kind of above her head, very Simba style. Yeah, I think that's all I have for you guys. So hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have questions.